evening to everyone present in this session. I, Aniket Sachan, the co-convener of the seminar committee, welcomes you all to today's meaningful session on the topic patent licensing in the times of pandemic. Today, it is our esteemed privilege as well as a golden opportunity to have amongst us Dr. Manchikanti Padmavati as the speaker for the talk. Ma'am currently is an associate professor at Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property Law, a law school that is based in Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. Ma'am has completed her PhD from Central University, Hyderabad, and her research area includes plant metabolic pathway, drug regulation, and commercialization. Ma'am also specializes in various aspects of IP, that is intellectual property, specifically patent research, mapping, and drug regulation. Apart from this, also Ma'am has done diverse experience in the field of patent law, as she is member of various professional bodies like Advisory Board of Journal of Intellectual Property Law (JIP). Apart from that, she is also a scientific member of Food Safety Goods Authority of India and member of West Bengal Science and Technology Council. She is also a life member of Biotech Research Society of India. So before moving ahead, I would just request all the participants to kindly note that the floor will remain open after the end of this session. Your questions and queries in the section as they will. So now, I would like to.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation and a very good afternoon to all of you. Let me share my presentation so we can go through the relevance of this. So, I will be speaking on is patent licensing during the pandemic times. All of us are witnessing the imagined scenario that we are in today, all because of a pandemic of this nature, which has actually changed the entire dimensions, including the dimensions of intellectual property. So my focus will be to talk to you about how do we perceive patent licensing during these times, and what are the developing scenarios and challenges in this particular area. Okay, let me move to my presentation. 1 second. Just 1 second. I'm not getting this. Share my screen. Maybe because you are the host.
So is the share content option not available to you?
Yeah, I don't get the share. It's not available for me because maybe I'm not the
Okay,
host.
okay, ma'am. I'm just switching the settings. I'm asking to switch the settings to you.
Okay, yeah. Then I can share it. Yes.
Settings have been made. Now you can share the screen.
Okay. Yeah. I can go to file. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Continue. I think. Yeah. Let's wait for it to get opened up. Yeah. I think. I hope you're able to see the screen.
Yes, ma'am. It's clearly visible.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Let me. So let me start the setting the context of the presentation. So today I will be dealing with looking at the context of. I don't think we are able to see the next set of slides. Okay, yeah, all right. I'll be able to flip this. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, good. Yes. So the context for our discussion today is to look at SARS-CoV-2, which is the virus that caused COVID-19 disease, and what is the status of it from the point of view of access to healthcare. That is necessary for us to understand the aspects of where is it that innovation is moving, how is intellectual property rights, our intellectual property rights being taken in this area, what is the of IP rights so far as access to healthcare is concerned. My particular focus will be on patents and SARS, and I will also bring to you what are the challenges that we are facing today in the wake of this pandemic in terms of patent licensing. So let me move to the first part of my presentation, which is to talk about where are we set with the COVID-19 disease as we see now, early as in February is the time when the need for opening up of data platform was seriously being pushed for. You can see that marked in the as the name editorial. The sequence of the virus was published on 11th of January 2020. The WHO issued what we call which is Public Health Emergency of International Concern, which is the declaration of the pandemic that happened in January 30, 2020, which was a very important announcement to set off a worldwide effort. So it's not about this virus being, endemic only in certain regions, but it had already, set its pace to move into a very rapid pandemic scenario. And well, with that in already in, the question that came up that there is no serious medication available at that point of time, neither did we have a vaccine, and nor do we have one now. With that, I think when you next editorial that it came up in May in Nature, the realization that there is a need to pool all the technologies, existing patents that are covered by that are covering those technologies, and hence a need for a global effort was realized. That brings in what we call a collaboration in the race to develop access to healthcare. And I also wanted to bring to your attention the WHO director's statement about two important things is that which are at that point of time a big concern is one is the spread of the disease, and also any inaction can be very severe on the global population in terms of any small inaction can lead to greater consequences. So I think this is a very important statement that even now continues to be relevant in the current context we are when we are into a significant amount of time into. When one looks at the access to healthcare, what is it that we have at hand? First is, typically, if you look at any area where you're addressing, health issues, or a disease of this nature, one is, do we have drugs available to treat the disease? Do we have a vaccine in mind? Candidates. Now, how about the health infrastructure? Are we ready with the health infrastructure? One for the disease management and also for the diagnosis. So this is where we see the context of where the scope of intellectual property can actually come in. So we need to also keep in mind certain realities when we come to the aspect of this COVID-19 disease, which is very imperative for us to know because any solutions that we are addressing in the form of IP rights, and of course, significant part of it being patent rights, we need to keep this as a backdrop. Uh, Rapidity with which this disease is spreading, and there is always this uncertainty in terms of what's the exact period of that you have the incubation time in the body kind of thing. That is also very varying from anything between 2 to 14 days. So remember, it's not just about disease diagnosis, it's also about disease management, and then you need cure. So we need to look at these contexts to see where the IP concerns are or the intellectual property is being taken. Uh, yes, combination of drugs are being used at this. There is no one serious, remedy available to us at this point of time. There are also varied opinions and debates on the effectiveness of drugs. But yes, there is a serious effort in terms of doing clinical trials on the end of looking at what are the potential vaccines that can be actually flowed in, so that we can really uh, you know, take care of this particular scenario. That is on one hand. If you look at the cure and the diagnosis part, the third important challenge that we are facing is the disease management. Rightly, as many of you are aware, that the amount of healthcare infrastructure is severely poor to match the rapidness with which this disease is actually spreading. And so, therefore, demand is far outstripping the supply. There are severe manufacturing challenges. Even I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry or the biotech industry had never earlier experienced the the the, the times at which the scale up. So there is a lot of scientific endeavor that is happening in the background. The serious clinical trials are in different stages. It's almost like if you look at the tracker, you can identify which of those are in which phase of trials. All that information is available to us. So, what is very interesting to note is that while there are almost up to close to more than 100 and up to almost 130 different types of collaborations available in the world on either vaccines, or you're looking at serum based therapies, any of those, but still we are still very far from what we have as a solution to COVID-19. So with this as a backdrop, let me move into the aspect of looking at IP rights. As on date, as we know, that is as on August 5th, if you look at the global sharing facility at GSAD is the global initiative for sharing of the all influenza data basically. So these genome sequences of 78,334 genome sequences as on date have been deposited. So this becomes the facility from where people are actually, countries, about entities and institutions are actually taking this to be the starting material for possible solutions. Well, with all that is there, the question that we have at our hand is that one is, what is the new information coming out to us which can be used as a solution? Can we have repurposing? Because if you realize, remdesivir was developed for Ebola and other viral outbreaks, and as is now showing some promise so far as the COVID-19 scenario is against SARS-CoV-2 virus. So the question that comes to our mind is, did we not learn enough from the Ebola epidemic, and what should be the kind of response? And rightly, the GSAID is, now serving as a one-stop repository for any such future scenarios. And the world needs to be prepared, because our preparation seems to be, not yet. We are not yet ready with the solutions for it. Fair enough that there have been a lot of global efforts and serious efforts in that direction. So let me now move into the aspects of intellectual property rights before we move into patents, because this forms the umbrella. So far as SARS-CoV-2 virus is concerned, which leads to the disease COVID-19, we have the following, which are actually possible as intellectual property rights, and they do, there are a lot of designs which are already taken as rights. Drugs with the potential prophylactic and therapeutic as patents, drug patents, then you have potential vaccine candidates also as patents. To the health devices, medical devices, all of you have heard of the face masks, different types of ventilators, and also mobility based ones, customized ones, the different healthcare equipment which is necessary, and also the PPEs. Many of these are covered by design rights as well. An important component of the test data that is coming out of the clinical trial data is covered under data protection. And all of this constitutes know-how, which is very important uh, so far as giving us important leads in relation to the value of solutions that are coming up in this particular area. So I just also wanted to give you an instance of what are the kind of scenarios that are appearing for vaccine candidates, because there's also a very concerted effort in relation to these. So on one end, there are a lot of antiviral drug candidates that are being processed and looked at and screened for the value. You have nucleic acid based vaccines and also subunit vaccines and whole vaccine candidates being looked at. So there are several scenarios that are opening up so far as the, and this is just a glimpse of some of the patents in relation to SARS. Typically, one is searching for the what are the solutions available for SARS. It is ideal that you give in this particular keyword of SARS virus, and then you can add in that uh, you get the patents in relation to that. And of course, they are spread across different territories. So you have patents, European patents, all of those. Remember that we've had the scenario of the initial SARS in 2003. Then it was 2012 when MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, that particular virus outbreak was seen. Now, very interestingly, SARS-CoV-2 has a greater amount of homology, that is sequence similarity between the SARS-3 virus as well as the MERS virus. So somewhere one is looking at what earlier in relation to those viruses is of very immediate importance when we are looking at solutions for SARS-CoV-2 as well. So these are just examples of some of the drugs that are being looked at and vaccine compositions as well as other candidates which offer promise. So why is it that the SARS-CoV-2 and patent scenario is very interesting compared to others? Um, this is one very interesting area to work on to understand the collaborative network in terms of who are the people who are working on this particular thing and in what kind of joint collaboration they are working on. How is the intellectual property sharing happening between these different entities? How many of them are company to company, assignee to assignee, in terms of company to company, some institute to company, some institutions and with another institution working together. So that is one dimension of looking at the scenario of SARS. The other scenario is opening up patents. This is a dilemma that inventors face in a scenario like this. That there is a serious call for opening up of patent rights. That is of the enforcement of patents, suspending patent rights in the wake of how do we look at the balancing of the inventor incentive vis-a-vis public access to technology? So that is where you see the challenge in terms of seeking out licenses. The WHO call for the patent pool is now growing in a very very positive direction than when it just started. When there were serious concerns about IP on IP sharing. So today we can see that there is a greater commitment that comes out. So I had put this thing that yes, extraordinary situations demand extraordinary measures, and COVID-19 scenario is an excellent example of where imperative it is to share technology. IP needs to be opened up, and at least that brings in what we call our rapid response in a joint action partners working on it. So, what is the sum and substance of the need that we look at? we, even before we understand the aspects of patent licensing in this area, is that we need technology solutions to be shared, and and development is still in the fore for the following reasons: for detection, prevention, treatment, and response in the COVID-19 scenario. So, what is it that we have at hand of time? Yes, there has been a very concerted effort of post in March, almost end March, the Medicine Sans Frontiers uh, gave a call for the need for voluntary licensing of the patent pool, bringing together the patents that are relevant for addressing pandemic. And the WHO launched the voluntary pool for collection of the patent rights. Uh, One needs to keep in mind that it's just not the patent rights that need to be taken into consideration. Remember that you may have the patent in mind, and you may have the composition, but what is more important is you also need access of how that is faring in terms of the clinical trial data. So the regulatory test data is adequately also necessary in order to really come up with a very effective solution for this particular scenario. So developing drugs, vaccines, and diagnostic tools is the basic, background with which the WHO launched this. This the area where they're looking at pooling up of patent rights. Now, as we see, there is a technology access pool link also that is available, where one can actually pledge patents. So patent pledging, if one way to study, this is an excellent example of studying patent pledges, where pooling of knowledge, and so therefore where one can look at actually greater access. So that forms the basis of the WHO voluntary pool. Also, it brings in the aspect of the licensing mechanism as well. As you can see, if you go to the WHO Act site, the access to the technologies for COVID-19, you can also see the licensing templates that are available, which can be actually adopted by individual countries and the companies working within that in order to gain access to which is being submitted under the WHO form. This platform is also very vital for also enabling funding mechanism. So that is where you see the value of this particular voluntary pool. And this had come about because of the call for WHO for a response plan to be made. Today, we see this expanding into a greater commitment as we see going forward. So we'll discuss some of that as we move forward with this in this discussion. So the MedSpal is one important database that you can look at, where it not only now has the SARS-CoV-2 coverage, but even the general, virus, viral diseases, and TB is also covered. Tuberculosis is also covered. So technologies have been actually submitted to this UN-backed uh, effort, where licenses can be taken out, and this enables a lot of the low-income countries to gain access in different forms of treatment options that are available. Uh, that the freedom is also available to the countries to also come up with their own dosage, which is relevant to individual countries. So this is, of course, this has now been expanded to SARS-CoV-2 as well. So this is some interesting, again, financed by the UNITAID. So the accelerator in terms of the COVID tools is another initiative where they're looking at different arrangements in terms of partnerships in different areas. I mentioned to you that here they are looking at diagnosis as well as the vaccines as well, both of them. Sorry. So then, of course, you may be aware that there has been a G10 initiative as well. Gavi is the Global Alliance on Vaccine Initiative, and this multilateral initiative is again another thing within the WHO for which is promoting a lot of effort in terms of the access to uh, solutions that are possible. At this stage, I would like to bring to you a very interesting scenario. I do not know how many of you have looked up this particular case of Inovio versus Inovio Pharmaceuticals versus VGXI. This case is basically about a breach of contract where sought for preliminary mandatory injunction, which was denied. The case was decided in June, and very interestingly, I wanted to bring you this case not from the point of view of the patent as, issue, but it's a concern from the point of view of where we have the uh, serious consideration. On one hand, you have intellectual property, you have technology being developed by Inovio, but the technology development or the vaccine candidate is just not enough. Remember that this needs to go to millions of people, which means you need a manufacturing unit. You need a unit which will manufacture and market in those many dosages and in those many numbers. So that has become the biggest problem for all these companies which are into innovation. So this case of Inovio versus VGXI sets us into the background of where VGXI has committed by way of the agreement to only certain dosages. Okay. Now, in the wake of Inovio developing the potential vaccine, which is already into trials, Inovio wants the VGXI to develop a certain amount of dosage numbers for the uh, 2021 and beyond, and those numbers are not easily achievable. The case is set as a breach of contract in relation to particular scenario where Inovio is compelling VGXI to open up its technology to other partners, okay, which Inovio will choose, because since VGXI is unable to make those million dosages, so VGXI makes an X count. Other partners who are with Inovio will make the, let's say Y, Z, and etc. will actually make the other set of dosages. So what does this mean? It means VGXI sharing its proprietary technology, and VGXI is not willing to do that. And VGXI has come up on its own, saying that, well, we have also arrangement which we can, give to you, but not at this called unreasonable demand that Inovio has imposed on VGXI. So it's a very interesting case that is set. If you look at the Inovio versus VGXI, I just wanted to bring you that as a backdrop, just to let you know that innovation is only one part of it. Taking a patent is only one part of the story. You have to be making available, let's say, 1 million doses per, this thing, and per annual, and then maybe you need to also send it to a few countries because then there are arrangements. So no one company can do all of it, manufacture as well as market. One can develop the vaccine candidate, but actually to manufacture those many dosages, you need partnership. And this is where you are seeing a serious, difficulties. Companies are working together in partnerships. What you see on this particular slide is just an instance of one of those 130. I talked to you about some of those companies which are listed here, and what is it that they are working on, and whose role is what in this particular scenario. It's another slide again, which talks about again some from the end of Indian side also in terms of this. Today, you have also watched the news where there are marching rights being sought for in the United States for remdesivir. Like, of course, there's a serious challenge on whether this comes under the purview of the withdrawal at all or not, because the development has not been totally public funded. Okay, so you may want to go and read that particular story, which will be useful to understand where the issues are coming up. So emergency use authorization uh, is also becoming a serious challenge because, well, the FDAs are giving out emergency use authorizations. Companies are somewhat very unwilling because there are serious concerns about how their IP is protected. So these concerns will be there. It's not unusual. It's only time will tell us how all this will settle into a place. And certainly, what appears positive in this direction is the efforts that are pulling up so far as the WHO scenario is concerned. So when we are looking at the licensing in this area, so what is it that we are really concerned about? So we need acceleration of the capacity to research. So we need people to work together. We need sharing of technologies. That means that there may be also patent licensing, permitted use of patents and the technology underlying that. So we need. We also need to develop and make vaccines available for clinical trials. And you are already seeing the companies are testing out there in different phases. In India, also, there are trials happening. You must have also heard of the Serum Institute of India has also signed up with the Oxford vaccine, showing some promise. So the third important thing that comes into picture is scaling up uh, capabilities, and that's another big challenge that we face in relation to licensing. And yes, allocation, because this is something which is also very relevant when we talk about the current pandemic scenario. So, vaccine allocation, how is it going to have? So, this equitable access part of it, are we? How many of those licensing arrangements take into consideration equitable access? It's very nice to have this word into an agreement, but if you really look at it logistically, there are serious concerns about can we really achieve it. So this is something which is also a very big challenge at the moment. So therefore, keeping some of this in mind, and this context preempted the need for now countries to start looking at advanced purchase agreements, and that is where you again have the global effort coming up, which is what we are talking about, the advanced market commitment of Gavi. It's again part of the entire global facility under WHO. So, what is this basically? It comes under the COVID, vaccines set into that itself. So, how is it going to be helpful? It's going to helpful because the countries are going to make their commitments, and once the commitments are made, the channel opens for funding, and there is some level of what you call guaranteeing of, okay, this is the X amount of supply goes into a particular country or into a particular region. So this arrangement is pre-planned, and this advanced market commitment is a kind of a pre-planning so that this equitable access to the vaccine facility that is being looked at, potential vaccine candidates. This gets opened up in a more logistic way. So that is one thing, and ultimately, nowhere it should disadvantage low-income countries, and so this effort is also positively in that direction to support the entire high-risk population, particularly in these countries. So this forms what we call the current status of what we see the general for of patent licensing. But if you look at the individual arrangements between different companies, if you look at the COVID SARS-CoV-2 vaccine scenario, every company has its own arrangement with the partner company, manufacture and marketing, and those kind of things. So this is actually a very good time to really work on intellectual property licensing, particularly if you look at patent licensing. How are the terms changing? So you will have clauses saying that, well, this arrangement is up to the pandemic time, and then what happens to clauses such as where commitments are not kept in relation to the manufacturing doses. So where are the flexibilities that the agreements offer? What are the safeguard clauses so far as these of this kind of agreements? So these form a very important backdrop if one looks at. And of course, there are several arrangements with hospitals as well. So that is you're looking at access to point-to-point scenarios between public and private funded players. So I would like to close the presentation here and take questions, because this is again a huge area to work on, and there is quite a bit happening. If you look at licensing in different aspects, of course, my effort was to talk about the vaccine part of it, and but if you look at the drug licensing part, that is also very interesting the way it is coming up. So you may have several licensing arrangements, but the question that comes up is that are those companies, the licensees, able to really manufacture those many doses? And you really do not nature of this pandemic, how much of it is required. So that is something which is so you have to have a very flexible scenario, and so that there is a good partnership that can happen, and at the end of it you have access to technology which should be made available in this way. So I'll stop at this to and I'll be willing to take questions if you have them.
Ma'am, one question I would only like to ask. The thing you told about the vaccine companies, like whatever the partnership and all the things they're doing to make out the successful doses in the entire country. Don't you think that the first company, whoever comes with this productive vaccine which has a mass success rate, it will try does the patent of that particular vaccine will surely suppress the other companies or drug makers in such time to deal with this vaccine and the spread of this vaccine to other nations, especially the lower income countries.
Yes. So yeah. So your question, let me just rephrase your question. So what you're saying is, when the company is the first one to develop, can that also mean that locking intellectual property cannot allow percolation of technology? Is that right? Is that
Yes,
what you
ma'am.
want
Yes,
to
ma'am.
ask? Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
yeah. That can potentially lead to blockades so far as access to technology is concerned. And I think that is this thing where the WHO is urging countries as well as companies to come forward and deposit their IP. So pledging of IP is important, pledging of patents is important. And yes, we need to also balance that with the rights, patent rights. But I think in a scenario like this pandemic, it is better to open up the IP and seek early, rather than close the IP and not have any value at all. Because if you look at, again, I'm looking, since I'm also a scientist, by way of my discipline, I'm also looking at the data that is coming out of remdesivir testing, any of those, vaccine targets, those candidates. So, and the disease is also very interesting, because it's not that the symptoms are the same in all cases, and immunity levels are the same. And those having comorbidities have a different type of, response. So we are addressing in mind. If I were a company really looking at protecting IP, uh, if you look at Gilead or any of those companies, they've immediately gotten into licensing arrangements. So later that you get into the opening of IP, maybe the IP that you have may not have any relevance at all. So which is which is what my a thumb rule says one thing very clearly to us. Such has been the rapidity of this pandemic that today no one is just looking at only vaccine targets. They're looking at plasma. They're looking at many other stem cells. Even that research is also happening. So when you have multifaceted approaches already there, no single person can enrich monopoly. I hope you get it. So the better way is to open up and lock agreements. This is up to this period. You're not allowed to sub-license. Any technology development that you do is granted back. Those kind of things can at least help you leverage. Else, what happens if you are sitting with the technology and don't want to share it? well, good, fine, that's nice, but it may also be possible that you may not be relevant when you really want to open up your IP. So that would be my take on this. Yeah, any other questions?
Hello, good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, there is one question I would like to ask that, this recent deal between Oxford University and Serum Institute, under
Yes.
which organization that the procedures of this deal was occurred, and is there any other international organization which deal with these kind of deals, or it was deal under WHO or World Trade Organization?
Well, this, yeah, I understand the Oxford and the Serum India Institute. Yeah, that's right. SI, that they were into this arrangement. Yes, there are a lot of countries who are also working under the purview of WHO. It's almost like I think 60 countries are, a significant part of the globe presented under the WHO pool. Of course, we do not have internal specific information on exactly what are the. We know the candidates, in terms of the general names, but what are the specific arrangements? So that I think we do not know. That forms part of their, non-disclosure. But if you look at the WHO database, you have some leads at least as far as what kind of licensing templates can generally be applied. That general template is available, and uh, so nowhere WHO is saying that you have your IP, but at the same time you can also open it up. That's the more the kind of
So, ma'am, countries also influence these kind of deals.
sorry.
Ma'am, countries also influence these kinds of deals. I
No,
mean, countries,
countries are
the
basically, see,
laws.
countries are really, countries look at it more from the point of view of policy to facilitate transfer. So, under that, in those countries, who are the entities who are actually going to take up that licensing arrangement happens with them.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question in the question answer tab. The question is,
Okay.
can the government see to it that the vaccine can be manufactured generically in India for a limited time?
Well, yes, happen because of international arrangements. Uh, it can also, the government can also call for, well, there's also a lot of discussion on the parallel, this thing on compulsory licensing. So government can step in, utilizing the provisions under the patent law for, emergency use, as well as governmental laws are there to call out for, mandatory licensing of technologies. That, yes, under that context, yes, it can happen. It can happen where, and you see that many countries have also opened up their, if you see Israel, you see Germany, many countries are already looking at this. And see, remember this, compulsory licensing is not only for the vaccine candidates or the drugs, even access to technologies for healthcare infrastructure. There also we are severely impaired. Can you imagine developed countries are having such difficulty in the infrastructure in, and for a country which is so, one of the most populous countries, be doing very well on getting the drug into the country, getting that manufactured. But if our healthcare infrastructure is not up to the mark, again, that is an impediment. So we have to look at both these scenarios when we look at the, yes, governments can actually ask for mandatory licensing for technology. That's possible. But that's within the country. If they have patent rights, you can suspend the rights by utilizing the governmental clauses. But then if you're looking at technology coming from outside the country by governmental arrangements, yes, there is possibility. And I talked to you about Medicine Sans Frontiers. Doctors Without Borders is the one which is doing that policy engagement by bringing together companies, countries together, uh, forming a kind of a, putting a positive pressure on WHO to engage in specific. So, and today I just talked to you about this recent effort that has come up on the coming up with support measures. I think this is a very good way forward because just what I talked to you in the earlier slide about the response mechanism. that is very necessary because pre-planning is necessary. Remember that if you recently notice, WHO has also given the statement that this pandemic is here to stay. That means we are looking at beyond 2021. There is already a talk of resurging of this particular SARS-CoV virus. So, and this also puts in a question of our preparedness in relation to future pandemics. So I would believe that the biggest achievement that the world has done is certainly accelerated research to come up with potential candidates. There's a serious effort of moving that into the last phase of clinical trials. That is commendable. Equally commendable is the effort of pooling technologies to as patent pooling, because I do not think that we've had such kind of patent pooling even under Gavi, which is Global Alliance for Vaccine Initiative, has been typically for only some diseases, but I think this has been a much more rapid response. Yes. Any other questions?
Right now,
I,
I guess there are no questions in on board in the chat box also. So I
okay.
guess, ma'am, this would be the end of the question answer session. Ma'am, sincerely thank you for this taking out time in this busy schedule and granting us the opportunity to hear from you regarding the valuable inputs on the following topic, like what you told regarding the patent pool concept of WHO to standardize the patent procedure so that the vaccines can be operated at a global level. Apart from that, your insight also on Innova case, which was really a welcoming case, as many of our law students also are not much more aware in the contact detail of
Yeah.
that case. So it was
Yeah.
a really
Just like, sure. Yeah, sorry I interrupted, but I would insist every law student to go through the Innovio Pharmaceuticals versus VGXI case on two counts. One is to look at what happens. See, this is a very interesting case of public policy. This is a very interesting case of where speculations cannot be, and how court reads reasonableness. Uh, you know, instance, and how evidence, in terms of breach of contract. Um, so all of that, and in fact, I do not know how many of you, when you read contract, you really look at technology contracts. If you look at the annexures of that particular case, I've gone through all of those. Uh, it's very interesting if you see the how the technology use part of this has been carved into the agreement, including the IP sharing. They talk about the packaged material and how that packaged material will be actually shared. Uh, it's very interesting for those types of contract to look at this. So yeah, I stopped only for that. Otherwise,
No, ma'am, it was really a good point that you raised technological aspect of contract, because like we when we study contracts are much most focused on the normal standardized contracts and the bare act portion, and like even in the law schools also, what me and my friends in other NLUs and other schools have also seen, that the technology aspect of contract is not limited in the syllabus also, because they generally deal with the standard contracts that has been taught from the centuries and the procedure that has
yeah,
happened.
standard form of
And those who
contract.
deal with this, those who deal with these technical contracts are evenly mainly the partners of firms or lawyers, because they only deal with such matters. So even the teachers also at some, I would like to say, that are not trying to inculcate this portion in the syllabus, which should really be done, so that with the emerging field, as we know, the prime minister is also trying on the digitalizing the concepts and all the things, we know that the skill India concept is emerging. So with the advancement of technology also, these things should be also incorporated in the syllabus, so that in the coming years also we can also have a brighter idea regarding these things.
True, true. Yeah, increasingly you see technology contracts are very complex, you see. And if you see intellectual property contracts are even more complex because there's a background IP, and then the how the background IP to the agreement, how the utilization of a background IP to mix with the current IP to make the future IP. So where are the restrictions imposed? You want someone to use the background IP, at the same time you don't want them to walk away with your. How do you lock them into the contract? You know, so you have some different clauses in the agreement, you have grant backs, you have restrictive covenants, and it's very interesting, if you look at some of these things. We tend to deal with it because we are dealing with intellectual property cases day in and day out. So, yeah, I hope you can develop that expertise going forward.
Sure, ma'am. Ma'am, it was really a wonderful opportunity to have you and to listen to your valuable insights on these topics. I would like to sincerely thank you to take a time from your schedule and grant us an opportunity so that we can develop our insights also regarding this field of patent licensing as the time of pandemic, and also the things you told regarding the case that is really important, like Innovio versus VJ, which will surely be a read for all the law students in our college as well as other students also whom we will be touched. I would also like to thank our program director who gave us permission to conduct this following program. Thank you, ma'am, for this session today. Looking forward to more sessions from you. Thank you, ma'am.
Sure. Sure. Thank you. If you have any further questions, you can send them over the email. Okay.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. Good luck. Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.